There's this issue that a lot of folks think that, well, yeah, the right party wasn't blamed for what happened 11 years ago. That it was, like a car wreck that happened 11 years ago where the wrong party got the traffic ticket. That's the way I like to put it. It seems like, they think that it's no big deal. It doesn't matter who did it. We know it's not the story that we were given. But what the important part is, the technology, it turns out, that was used on that day is phenomenal technology. And the more people that know about it, the safer that technology will be. If we put our heads in the sand and ignore the fact that that technology exists, you can guarantee it's going to be used again and again and again. And it is a horrendous technology that can destroy the planet pretty quickly.
Do you think it's being used in other instances?
Oh, sure. But I think it's so important. The most important thing is for people to realize that it can be used for good. Nikola Tesla wanted to give free energy to the world, but he was afraid it might be used for evil purposes. Well, if there's any silver lining to 9/11, it's that, been there, done that. It's been used for evil. That means we can use it for good without worrying about that risk because it's already happened. And the more people know about it, the safer it will be.
And do you feel that this energy can be used to alter our environment, influence the environment that we live in?
It can do a lot of things, like destroy the planet, destroy a continent.
And the military do have secret departments and...
Oh, there's lots of secret technology out there that's been around for a very long time. And, folks like to talk about trendy terms like HARP and so forth. One thing that's important to remember with that is that any classified technology, by definition, is not in the public domain. So, therefore, whatever is being used like that is not something we would be told about.
Well, certainly it's true for HARP as well. We're not going to find any evidence of what it's really doing. Right.
We're just told some story somewhere, and I'd rather just stay away from any kind of trendy terms like that people sort of use as name-dropping. They have no idea what it means. It's just another boogeyman. It's just like Bin Laden. They're just blaming it on something else.
There's something about human nature. We all crave, to have a god, someone to worship, to look up to, and we get manipulated. I mean, there's a lot of people walking around with the answers to 9/11, and a lot of people, smear other people. I mean, how do you cope, and how do you distinguish yourself from everyone else?
I know what I know that I know, and I know that the rest I don't know. And I think that is the most important thing to take away from this. If you are very rigorous about that and know what you know and why you know it, not just memorize talking points, but know what you know, you're less likely to be fooled. You're confident in what you know. And if there's something that's in a gray area that you don't know, that you yourself don't know, you don't need to talk about it until you do know. You can say other people think such and such and whatever, but so many folks just jump on a bandwagon, and it's like they learn from flashcards. And they're just memorizing flashcards, not understanding what those flashcards represent.
Well, the basic knowledge given out to the public at large is that planes went into the World Trade Centers and demolished them instantly, and thermite was actually used. I mean, can you just discount either of those statements?
What I look at first is what happened. In order to solve what happened, solve the whole thing, you need to first start out in a systematic order. To solve any problem, you need to identify the problem you're solving. If I say the answer is 27, am I right or wrong? Well, you got to know what the question is before you know if you're right or wrong. So you first need to define the problem, and once you determine what happened, then you can determine how it happened, then you can determine who did it, then you can determine
what is the problem?
Yeah, what is the problem? The problem is something happened to the buildings. The buildings went away. They're not there anymore. What happened? The buildings turned to powder in midair. The biggest key to a cover-up, the secret of how they do a cover-up, how you can do a magic show, deception. If you get people to first argue about how it was done before you define what it is, what you've done in doing that is focusing on how you have to assume the problem. You're then solving an assumed problem, an imagined problem. You're not solving the real problem. And as long as you're solving the imagined problem, the real problem never gets solved. So get people to focus on, how it was done. They're picking out eeny, meeny, miny, moe, multiple choice, where none of those choices are what address what happened. And then they just argue round circles and opinions because they haven't even defined the original problem. They just made an assumption. And in a way, that's what the NIST report did. They assumed there were planes. They didn't determine there were planes. It was an assumed problem.
Well, you're in Europe at the moment. Are you getting a positive response in Europe, different to America, or the same?
Very good response. If I talk to somebody on the street, somebody on the subway, they're receptive. And they can stop and think about things. Where in the U.S., very few people, it's a lot more of this, what I call cue card learning, where it's just, or flashcards. There's not a real depth of thought. And what I'm seeing with our culture is that we've turned our thinking over to someone else's keeping. We're given a list of talking points to memorize. And if we don't take our thinking back into our own keeping, all of us do that, we're headed for trouble.
The 9/11 kicked off the war on terror, and millions have died.
It was an attack on human consciousness. It's caused people to stop thinking. And I can understand that day, before you figure out what's going on, there's a whole lot of chaos. But human nature, it's got these vulnerabilities. That, imagine when you were a child, or you remember back when you were a child, something, or was that the story that was told over and over again? Do you remember the experience, or do you remember people telling you the story of the experience? There's a hazy line there, and pretty soon you don't know the difference between if it was a story that was just repeated a lot, or if you're really remembering it. Human memory is not like Memorex, and it's very pliable. So if we get an event like 9/11, people don't know what's going on, they're told what's going on, and then it moves on. Pretty soon, and it's repeated over and over again, it's like those childhood stories. You don't know what was real. And you start thinking that indeed did happen, even though it was just a suggestion. So being very vulnerable to these suggestions and hints that are dropped, we deceive ourselves like a magic show.
Human nature is easily manipulated.
Yes.
And you've come to question 9/11 with a lot of confidence in yourself, in what you're saying. But has it also led you to maybe question a lot of other things about how our society is run or manipulated?
Exactly, yes. Just like how magic shows are run. It's the same pattern. We deceive ourselves. You drop a couple of hints and people assume that's what the truth is and run with that and just work with that. There's, as I say, there's 3 reasons why people don't see what happened on 9/11. Any one of those things can stop them. Number 1, problem-solving skills. Knowing how to first determine what happened before you go to how it happened. Number 2 is groupthink, peer pressure. Being alone in your thoughts is very uncomfortable. You want to be with the group. And there's been various psychological experiments done that show that people give the wrong answer if everyone else has, because they tend to fit in. And the third thing is people are terrified of the implications. The implications are horrendous. And they want to pretend like things were when they were a child and the world's going to be like that forever. But it can't stay like that forever unless we keep it up.
So we're responsible. On 9/11 there was a Hurricane Aaron, and it decided to take a 90-degree turn and veered away from New York. That was strange. And we recently had Sandy, and we've had lots of storms. Can we have any reason to suspect any of these storms as having man's interference or
Well, some people might jump to that assumption, but again, let's be rigorous about what we know that we know that we know. And you can speculate, but don't mix those two. And speculation causes you to have a biased interpretation of data. So that's why it's not so good to do. Maybe a little bit of, intuition following, but be sure to always know what you know. And what I do know from 9/11 and the days leading up to that, Hurricane Aaron for 4 days was aimed straight towards New York City. There is a high pressure system moving from the west eastward that at some point would turn the hurricane around. And in the National Weather Service, those text messages they have, they thought that the hurricane was going to turn around on day 1. It didn't. Well, they thought it was going to turn around on day 2. It didn't. They thought it was going to turn around on day 3. It didn't. They thought it was going to turn around on day 4. And thank goodness it did, because there was no more room left. But what puzzles me is that the people of Manhattan and so forth weren't even warned in case there's a chance that they're wrong on the 4th day, and give a warning for voluntary evacuations. But it does cause you to question how someone could be that sure, or whoever decides on these things could be that sure that the hurricane was going to turn around on day 4.
Well, my final question is we just had this storm Sandy, huge storm, caused many deaths and people without electricity and fires. And do you think it was all 100% normal behavior of nature?
Oh, it definitely was not normal behavior. The overhyping of it in the media ahead of time is not normal, because we didn't even hear anything about Hurricane Aaron, and that was a Category 3 hurricane. It was very robust with just water in its path. Nothing, no land to break it up, no questionable things happening. And this Sandy weather, it didn't have the same kind of focus. It wasn't really focused. You barely saw an eye of the storm, or what they called the storm. There was an effect I saw from photos around Florida where folks were surfing. But I really haven't seen a lot of others, but I haven't been studying it that long because I was coming on the trip here. But the overhyping, in contrast to no one even knowing about Hurricane Aaron, is bizarre.
Is bizarre.